Tonight's story on DSNY Newscast is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction. This, as you may recognise, is a maintenance service elevator, still in operation, waiting for you. We invite you, if you dare, to step aboard in tonight's episode, as Tower of Terror is the star, and this elevator will travel directly to DSNY Newscast. In tonight's episode, we discuss the changes that have been made to the Disneyland Paris version of the Tower of Terror, and how it may or may not affect this ominous structure just behind me, otherwise known as the Hollywood Tower Hotel here at Disney's Hollywood Studios. But first, as with every investigation into the unknown, we must start at the beginning. 27 miles outside Paris, France, March 16th, 2002. Walt Disney Studios Park opened with surprisingly few attractions, so much so that many at the time classed it as a half-day park. And so to rectify this, it was decided that ahead of the park's 5th anniversary in 2007, it needed a major icon that could act as a pulling factor that would make the park more appealing and attract guests to come back and experience it once again. And thus, Disneyland Paris began construction on their own Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. However, the version found in Paris is actually an exact replica of the attraction that was created for Disney California Adventure and Tokyo Disney Sea, which saw a simplification of a more complex ride system that is found within the original Tower of Terror at Disney's Hollywood Studios. As these simplified versions of the attraction had the inclusion of dual loading floors, a horizontal pushback into the drop tower, and 2 separate thematic scenes that were originally intended to be the corridor and mirror segments. And this is important in understanding why these attractions have changed in the way they have, and any possible ramifications for the Walt Disney World version. As for a while, there were 3 Twilight Zone Tower of Terrors in operation around the world, all with the exact same ride premise.
Hollywood, 1939. Amid the glitz and the glitter of a bustling young movie town at the height of its golden age, the Hollywood Tower Hotel was a star in its own right, a beacon for the show business elite. Now, something is about to happen that will change all that.
However, for the Tokyo Disney Sea version, it was decided that it would have a completely different ride narrative altogether, thus bringing about the first version of the attraction to completely omit the Twilight Zone theme, as in Japan the TV series wasn't widely known. So instead, a completely original narrative was crafted around a fictional property tycoon, Harrison Hightower III, who conducted expeditions in the late 1800s, where he stole many priceless artifacts. But it wasn't until 1899, when he stole an African idol that was a beloved god to the natives, that he became cursed on New Year's Eve, following a press conference in which he mocked the idol, which angered the god and caused his elevator to plummet to the ground. However, upon recovery, Hightower's body was nowhere to be found, and it's said that to this day, the building is forever haunted by
Harrison Hightower III.
Now, it's very clear that the Tokyo version has a lot less of a fifth dimension vibe, but instead has a similar haunting narrative, more reminiscent of the Haunted Mansion. Whereas over in California and Paris, the attractions remained closely aligned to the Twilight Zone theme. That is, of course, until 2016, when the Californian version seemingly slipped into the fifth dimension and was lost forever, as it began its radical transformation into the extremely popular and well-received Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, with many guests preferring this re-theme to that of the truncated version of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror that previously resided in that location. And so it was after the success of Mission Breakout in 2017 that rumours began circulating about the future of Tower of Terror in Paris and even Walt Disney World as well. However, in 2018 it was announced that there would be an investment of $2.2 billion in Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris to completely revamp it into a full-day experience with a Star Wars, Marvel and Frozen themed land. And it was at this time that the large-scale retheme, like we saw with Disney California Adventure, was completely removed from consideration and replaced with a lengthy refurbishment that would seemingly keep the existing theme intact. Or so we thought. As when the attraction reopened once again on September 28, 2019, not only did it include enhanced illusions and ride profiles, but 3 new cursed experiences that is marketed as a new dimension of chill and thrill. Now all of these new ride profiles move away from the original narrative of the 5 people who stepped through the door of an elevator and into a nightmare, and instead it focuses in on the little girl that can be seen here within the footage, as she is present throughout all 3 of the new ride narratives. Now the renovation is designed similar to how Mission Breakout was revamped in 2017 to accommodate the various different music and scenes, as each one of the 3 elevator shafts in the Paris version had their own ride profile and unique story, with the first being called the Malevolent Machine, in which the little ghost girl traps you in the mechanical prison that is your maintenance service elevator, and then sends you plummeting to the same fate as her. Then the next is called the Shaft Creatures, where the little girl warns you of some of the demonic creatures that have taken control of the elevator, and warns you of how they feast on the cries of human souls. And lastly is the 5th dimension, which is obviously the closest to the original narrative, but with the addition of a sinister spectre that has opened up the 5th dimension and wants to take your soul with it. Now we don't have much in the way of video of these new show scenes, as obviously filming is strongly discouraged during such an intense attraction such as the Tower of Terror. But from what we've seen, it definitely seems that this attraction is making more distinct strides departing from the Twilight Zone vibe, as there is no longer the Rod Serling iconic narration as you're pushed back from the elevator doors, and there's very little use of the Twilight Zone theme or visuals like the time spirals or the glass breaking, which are intrinsically linked to the Twilight Zone TV show. Although that's not to say that the changes are bad, as from the reports I've heard from DLRP fans, Outside Ears and Disneyland Paris Works, the general consensus is that people prefer this new version over the original, as not only is the ride more thrilling and intense with the randomized drop sequences, but also the slight changes to the story depending on which elevator shaft you plummet within makes for an even eerier experience, almost as if the tower is deciding and changing on its own every time you ride it. However, the biggest difference is that it certainly has less of that classic, suspense-driven, paranormal and supernatural feeling, and instead implements some tropes more reminiscent of the horror genre, with the little girl singing nursery rhymes and speaking of creatures and spectres within the attraction. Now when this attraction reopened on September 28th, the Rod Serling pre-show video that played in the library was conspicuously missing, being replaced with a cast member delivering a few lines about how the hotel was haunted by this little girl. But since then, it's been reverted back to how it was before, playing the Rod Serling intro once again. However, considering that so much of the attraction is now focused around this little girl character, I would personally prefer an updated version of the Rod Serling clip that better explains the backstory of the little girl, as Disneyland Paris could easily achieve this by editing in some of the footage shot for this promotional clip for when it reopened. But either way, it's still good to know that the Twilight Zone clip remains within the attraction for the time being. But that brings me to my last point, as now that every Tower of Terror attraction around the world is unique in its own right, perhaps Disney is content with this current setup, as the original Tower of Terror that opened in 1994 at Walt Disney World was of course the first to debut the Twilight Zone theme, and so it would only be fitting if it was the last to keep it untouched. However, I can't help shake this feeling that with these recent changes to the narrative over at Disneyland Paris, that this might be a way of testing out some scenarios in which Disney could remove the Twilight Zone theming altogether, and see how guests respond and react to the changes. But the problem with this thinking is twofold, as European and American audiences have a very different connection to the original TV series, as obviously it was way more popular in the United States. And then you have the second factor, which is that the attraction in Walt Disney World has been around for 25 years instead of only 13 years in Disneyland Paris, and thus it means that the guests in Walt Disney World have a longer history with the attraction as it currently is. But then we come to the last factor out of all of this, and it's probably the most important, and that is the issue over rights to the Twilight Zone branding. As with CBS rebooting the series for its all-access streaming service this year, and then commissioning a second season already, it seems as if CBS is intent on revitalising the Twilight Zone name, which in turn will most likely have an effect on the existing licensing arrangement when it comes to its renewal for the attraction. As with these streaming wars currently intensifying, CBS knows that the Twilight Zone is one of their biggest TV brands alongside Star Trek and Superman, all of which are cornerstones for the new streaming service. And then you have a current trend within Disney parks, which is that Disney has been slowly removing sponsorship integration and non-Disney IP offerings from the parks and replacing them with ones that they have complete ownership. So it could be argued that with the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror being one of the last remaining attractions that has external licensing so integral to the attraction experience, logic would dictate that it might be a target for future development, alongside the likes of Rock and Roller Coaster featuring Aerosmith. Although it wouldn't be as easy as just bringing these changes over to Walt Disney World, as the Disneyland Paris version does not take into account the vastly different ride system of the original attraction at Disney's Hollywood Studios, that has a fifth dimension dark ride scene that you travel through that is duplicated and shared by 4 elevator loading shafts, thus meaning that there would be a possibility for 2 alternative ride narratives and not 3 as seen in Paris. And also because the Walt Disney World version uses more physical set pieces that integrate the Twilight Zone theme, it would require a lot more work to completely overhaul the attraction. But with all of that being said, it's important to note that no changes are currently planned, but it's certainly interesting to cross-examine the last remaining Twilight Zone Tower of Terrors in Disneyland Paris and Walt Disney World. As the saying goes, often where there is smoke, there's fire. And so the story history of this attraction is an ever-changing creature, one that has been prophesied before and proven incorrect. So for the time being, we will file this story under R for rumor. As for the foreseeable future, on any given night, the Hollywood Tower Hotel will continue to operate and transport guests directly to
the Twilight Zone.
But now, it's over to you, Waltoneers, as I would like to know what are your thoughts and opinions on the changes that have been made to the Disneyland Paris version of Tower of Terror, whether you like it or dislike it, and also if Disney were to ever remove the Twilight Zone theming from the Walt Disney World version, then what would you choose as an alternative ride narrative for the attraction so that it could remain as the Tower of Terror, but with a slightly different theme? And of course, don't forget to put the timestamp for where the hidden Mickey appeared somewhere within this video along with your suggestion or your comment to be in with a chance to win one of these official Waltoneer DSNY Newscast enamel pins. And congratulations to this Waltoneer here for winning this suggestion from a previous video where we're talking all about the rumoured nighttime entertainment offerings coming for Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary. And so that's it for today, so be sure to go ahead and subscribe down below if you're new to this channel, hit that notification icon so that you always receive an update whenever we release new videos, which is usually twice a week. And also, if you've enjoyed this very special edition of DSNY Newscast for Halloween, then be sure to give this video a massive thumbs up as it really does help this channel out. And I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.